You and I are both very familiar with the green agenda that is being pushed on us from on high. But as always happens with all central planning, there are major problems with this on the horizon. One of these problems is the supply of the resources needed to bring this vision to completion. Now, in order to illustrate what is going on right now, I have to share a story with you that was detailed by Joseph Solis-Mullen on the Mises Institute website, mises.org. In 2021, the Sri Lankan president Gotabaya Rajapaksa, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his name, embarked on a green revolution for his country. Because with the pure delight of Western authoritarians, he declared that his country was not green enough. Now, as an agricultural society, most Sri Lankans being farmers, they used fertilizers and pesticides, obviously, to grow their crops. This is what helped their country produce enough food. But the president saw his country becoming a beacon of green hope for the world, so he declared that these non-organic chemical fertilizers were against the law because they were terrible for the environment. Now, unsurprisingly, these bans led to a massive increase in starvation and poverty. Food output dropped by 20%. Inflation rose by 50%. Now, thankfully, this green revolution resulted in a real revolution, and this president is no longer in power because anyone who values the environment, the planet, plants, animal life, no matter to what extent over human life, deserves not even a shred of power. Now, it's possible that you're sitting there listening to this and thinking, well, I'm glad this is just something that happened to somebody else somewhere else, and it's not happening here. But unfortunately, this same story is playing out with different characters here. Instead of a war on food, we've got a war on fuel, with fossil fuels responsible for everything from the development to the production to the transportation of almost everything we use and consume on a daily basis. And central planners are calling it evil, and they want to replace it all as much as possible with their green alternatives. Now, you might be sitting here thinking, well, there are a lot of harms and evils that fossil fuels cause, and you're probably right. For instance, you can even look at non-organic chemical fertilizers and pesticides and point out all the harm that they cause. That's why I don't eat anything made with grains, made with processed sugars, made with seed oils, because I think there are much better alternatives. But if I was faced with a choice between eating processed sugars and pesticide-filled grains and seed oils, that versus starvation, come on. So just because there might be better alternatives somewhere in the future, that doesn't mean that the current solution isn't also a better alternative to something we've left behind in the past. So there are absolutely drawbacks to our world today built on fossil fuels, but the alternative would be a complete breakdown of the entire system and a loss of a massive amount of wealth. And just a hint, that's what these authoritarian greenmongers are actually hoping for. So how do I know that we can't actually finish this green revolution to completion? All we have to do is look at one area with one constraint, and that's going to be the EV market with lithium. And toward the end of the video, we're going to get into a way that you can play this and make money off of this with the sponsor of today's video, Recharge Resources, symbol RECHF, but more on that later. You see, transportation is one of the main pillars that these net zero green authoritarian plans rely on. So they think if we can replace gasoline and diesel cars with electric vehicles, we're a quarter of the way there. Now, due to the central planners' regulations and subsidies, this market is expected to expand at a growth rate of 18% until 2030. This means electric vehicles are expected to make up over half of new vehicles by 2040. But here's the kicker, it's not even just electric vehicles. Even internal combustion engine cars right now are required to use batteries simply to meet the increasingly oppressive regulations and demands by governments. Look at all the new cars coming off the factory lines from Ford, GM, Toyota. They're all hybrids now just to meet the gas mileage and consumer preferences. Now, this is just one tiny little segment of the green future that these central planners are trying to push. It doesn't even take into account the battery storage for utilities, for electric grids, cell phones, laptops, wearables, and everything else that requires batteries. All points to one metal that has some severe supply and demand mismatch right now, lithium. Which brings up the question, what's the problem with this push? It's the constraint that this plan has, which all relies on lithium. Because lithium is required for all of this, and there is not enough of it. In fact, at the current pace, the lithium supply is set to be outpaced by demand in just 5 years. By the year 2025, the projected lithium-ion battery market is set to hit just under $100 billion. And just like the other metals necessary in these batteries, lithium is set to get worse and worse in terms of its demand to supply mismatch as time goes on. So just like in Sri Lanka, where they said you have to stop using the type of food production that you want, caused a reduction in the amount of food available and an increase in the costs, so will these central planners, the authoritarians with their green plans, saying you can't use transportation the way you want, you have to do it our way, will result in lower transportation available, fewer cars, and much higher costs. But as with every problem, there is always an opportunity. And so it's not about getting rich off of the problems of the world. It's recognizing, hey, I think the world should be one way, but since I know it's going to be another way, might as well take advantage of it if I can. Central planning always causes a misallocation of resources. And so by central planners pushing more and more resources into EV and green tech, that is going to push up those prices beyond the point that they should be naturally. Which means as this trend continues, lithium costs and lithium prices will continue to climb through the roof. We can see the early results of this as lithium prices over just the last couple of years have absolutely exploded. As with anything, when the supply of something is not enough to meet the demand, that's going to push prices up. And over the coming years, this means that with lithium, we need the supply to quadruple to meet the future demand. Obviously, for this to happen, you need more mining to take place. The problem is, lithium projects take roughly a decade to develop and bring online, which means that existing lithium mines are positioned to take advantage of the supply and demand mismatch for the next 5 to 10 years. Now, obviously, you could invest in something like LIT, which is an ETF invested in lithium and battery technology, as a rising tide usually lifts all boats. However, there are some other ways where you could get a little bit more bang for your buck, a little bit more leverage, a higher output for your input. And this is investing in the mining companies themselves directly. Now, one of these miners that I've recently built a small position in is Recharge Resources, symbol RECHF. Now, it's important with stocks like this, you have to remember, you have to leg in slowly. The market cap of this entire company right now is just under $9 million US. If we take a look at the daily volume recently, around 300,000 shares per day at about 25 cents a share, this means that with a very small purchase of $50,000, $100,000, you could be soaking up the entire daily volume here, which means that given the wide bid-ask spreads, the illiquidity here, if you go in and dump a market order in and say, hey, just buy me this many shares at whatever price, well, you're going to soak up all the sell orders and you could push this thing sky high. And then immediately it's just back down to the price that it was before you purchased. And so with stocks like this with low market caps, you have to work these things slowly, only use limit orders, make sure you're buying on weakness so that you're buying what other people are selling. You got to be careful with small stocks. But that also presents an opportunity here because when money starts to flood into the space, there are not that many lithium miners around the world. And so as demand continues to outstrip supply, it's like a fire hose of money scrambling to buy up lithium stores all around the world. It's like a fire hose coming through the eye of a needle. Right now, the valuation for Recharge Resources is fantastic. They've got an extremely healthy cash position and no debt. And with a very low price to book ratio, this could be very attractive for value investors as it gets discovered. Recharge Resources has multiple projects located around the world. Their main one is in Argentina. Their main one, Poquitos in Argentina. Now, especially for lithium, I really like Argentina because it's set to become one of, if not the largest lithium exporter in the world soon. In addition to that, they've got a great management team. Their CEO, David Greenway, has over 2 decades of experience focused on the management and development of junior mining companies and public resource companies. Now, as a kicker, this project, the Pinchy Lake Nickel Project, is exciting as well because the company recently announced plans to spin this off. They own it 100% and they're going to spin it off into its own company. And the shares will be awarded on a 1-for-3 basis, which is fantastic because everything that we've talked about in this video in terms of the green push and the lithium bottlenecks and the supply and demand mismatch, they apply to nickel as well. So buying this company is like a 2-for-1 where you get exposure to a great lithium mine and to a company for nickel. At the end of the day, I do not advocate for inflation. I do not advocate for central planning, but I have to keep my eyes open and see what is going on in the world, because if I see what is going on, then I can make changes and adjust my life to be able to benefit off of it. Instead of just saying, hey, it should be another way, might as well at least play the game that they're forcing me to play. And none of this is investment advice or recommendation. Do your own research so that you can make your own educated decisions. As always, I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.